probably the most profound moment was seeing a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, watching her kids watch her die, and they had lost all of their crops. They really had nothing. Forgotten Voices started out of a mission trip that our church, West Shore Free Church, had sent me and 11 others on a mission trip to figure out what we could do as a church. And we met all these children who had lost their parents and families who were about to die, leaving kids behind, and we were just overwhelmed by that. And so we kept meeting all these local pastors who had very clear visions for what should be done about the children orphaned by AIDS. My early experience with poverty in Africa was profound. I mean, I think that I had known about poverty, I had studied poverty, but to see poverty up hand, to see probably the most profound moment was seeing a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, watching her kids watch her die, and they had lost all of their crops, most of their animals. They really had nothing, and the father had already died, this mom was dying, and her 7-year-old and 4-year-old were watching her die. And just the void of resources, economic resources, the void of physical resources, the void of relational resources was profound.
I'm originally from Zimbabwe, born and raised in Zimbabwe, and just growing up in Zimbabwe, I really got to experience the reality of the vulnerable, orphaned and vulnerable children from a young age. And even in my growing up, we also experienced what vulnerability looked like growing up in a context where poverty is a reality, where there's political turmoil, which made life very difficult and affected many families. So we do not take orphans or vulnerable children away from their homes or communities to an institution, because research has shown over the time that institutions are not effective in responding to this crisis.
So there's about 155 million children worldwide who've lost their mom or dad or both. But of that, about 6 to 8 million kids live in orphanages. So, but within those 6 to 8 million kids living in orphanages, about 75% of those kids have at least one living parent. So these are parents who, for whatever reason, said, we can't take care of these kids anymore, or their kids were removed. And so, and the whole pool of kids who have lost mom and dad or both, it's a relatively small percentage of kids who live in orphanages. Yet, about 80% of the money to the global orphan care crisis goes toward orphanages. So, and it costs a significant amount more to take care of a kid in an orphanage than a family. And with most of those families deciding that they can't take care of their kids anymore and putting them in orphanage, it's generally economic reasons.
So our model is what we call family-based, and we also say that it's church-based because we are partnering with a local entity, the church, which is always there. Organizations like ours or others, they come and do work in a community and they leave. But the local church is an entity that is trusted by the local communities, and it is an entity that is made up of the local people themselves and is best positioned to respond effectively to the needs of the of families and children in their own communities.
Instead of supporting orphanages, we can help strengthen families, strengthen caregivers, and allow kids to grow up in a family, which is not only better for them, very practically, it's financially more efficient.
Children, who are orphaned have gone through such a terrible or hard time or loss, and sometimes they don't have the opportunity to grieve well, or they don't have skills to cope with what they've gone through, or even the challenges that they are facing. So when we talk of child-driven approach to orphan care, we're talking of really creating customized services that will help a child move from a place of vulnerability to a place of thriving.
Now that model has grown and multiplied in lots of organizations around the world who have seen what we're doing and have tried to adapt a similar approach.
Sometimes you don't see, kind of like short-term results, that you see immediate results, but that's the results sometimes take long. So that's challenging because we're also working in different countries that have their own complex factors that affect what is happening on the families in those countries.
People think about Africa as this one place, but there's so many different countries and farmer cultures. Like just in Zambia alone, there's 54 languages spoken. So when you think about cultural context, there are challenges with that, right? So Zambia is more economically well off than Zimbabwe, but wasn't always so. And there's Zimbabweans look down on Zambians, and now Zambians look down on Zimbabweans in terms of being the poor, underdeveloped people. And then Malawi's even worse in terms of economic development, but has is more maternal led, where fraternal order is more important in Zambia and Zimbabwe. So I think there's just complexities with language and culture and rural versus city. Every country has its own nuances, and even within that country, there's regions and ethnicities and tribes that have differences.
Running an organization that is working in multiple countries then requires more patience and more commitment, even more resources to be able to do and set up partnerships that are effective and that are responding well. Even in the midst of all of this chaos, there is still a glimpse of hope that we are seeing and hearing. The church particularly is stepping up. The local church is stepping up. Even with limited resources, we are seeing the church really step up and demonstrate the love of Christ even in the midst of this difficult time.
These are people who work for no money. They volunteer to help their neighbors. They care about the problem. They care about the people. And they're in it not to make money or to build their own kingdom. But local churches are there to solve a problem in the name of Christ. And I have seen faithfulness play out through the life of a church, and I've seen no greater pivot point in the restoration of a community than a local church.
One particular story that comes to mind is of a caregiver, what we call a grandma, who suddenly is now caring for 5 of grandchildren that have just lost their mom to COVID, in May. And we have seen how the church, even in that situation, how the church responded immediately, providing support for this family to bury their mom, but also provide, COVID, prevention materials, either it's masks or sanitizers to help this family because they've been already exposed, to stay, to prevent themselves from getting this virus. But particularly for this grandma, because already she's she's elderly and she's susceptible to get the virus. So we have been the church has been really helping to get her tested.
There's a woman that I remember meeting, and we'll call her Alice, and she had 4 kids, 3 of them school age when I met her, and she was in abject poverty, lost her husband to AIDS, and her life was a mess, and she was considering prostitution and then started engaging in prostitution because she had no other way to survive. And her church, trying to figure out how to help her, knew that she had a skill as a marketer in running a little business. And so they gave her a $100 grant for her to buy some materials and some products to start selling. And that $100 grant allowed her to start a market business, and then she made enough money to buy a fridge and then double her space. And in short order, she was sending her own kids to school, and Forgotten Voices was no longer doing anything to help her. And just the dignity to see that she didn't need to prostitute herself, that she could be an architect of redemption and restoration from a really dark spot, really was eye-opening to me and eye-opening to our donors, because we see people and we feel bad and we want to fix it. And that's a noble endeavor, but actually equipping her to fix it was better than us feeling better that we have addressed all of her problems. It took a little longer for her to start the business and get going, but through a $100 grant that the church decided to give her really was not only a success story for her and her family and her kids in breaking the cycle of poverty, but it was a really success story for us to see that actually we're not as smart as we think we are. That what I would have done was probably very different than what the church did, and certainly different one that she would have done, but we would have been very wrong.
COVID has added new challenges to this this crisis in a significant way. A recent study that actually came out last week that was published by The Lancet, it highlighted that there's about 4 million people that have passed away, globally from COVID, and about 2 million children have been left without a caregiver, or they've lost a caregiver or a parent. So meaning that we're seeing a significant growth in the number of children who are orphaned, and the number of children who have been left vulnerable, from the 153 million that was already there, estimated number of orphans who have lost one or both parents. So COVID has really brought in a new set of challenges and is expanding the number, but also it is changing how communities are responding. With all the restrictions that are there, it is making it harder for families to mourn the loss of of the caregiver, but also it's happening very quickly, that the death of a loved one is just immediate, that there's no preparation or anything like that, and families don't have room to grieve well. So we are seeing a new set of challenges that is affecting families and also children, and the way that they respond, particularly at this time.
Pieces of work that I've received from Africa is this one. Is the lion that was made by a local artist in Zimbabwe named Justice, and which is a good name for an artist in Zimbabwe. But this lion was actually purchased by our board chair. I was on a trip with he and his wife Rhonda in Zimbabwe, and Steve purchased this, and I said, I've never seen a finer lion. And this sat in his living room at his house for many years, and then when I left Forgotten Voices, he gave this to me at my going away party, and he said, Ryan the lion is the way he described this. So he had used this lion as a reminder of his trip to Zimbabwe, but also as a reminder to pray for me, and now this sits in my office as a reminder for me to pray to God for wisdom and guidance for the Forgotten Voices team that remains doing the work.